Hello and welcome to ATARC's webinar series. ATARC is the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center and is a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology and modernization initiatives. They provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. Today's session is on the executive order, the President's management agenda, and customer experience. Our topic experts joining us here today will share strategies that agencies can implement to meet mission objectives. My name is Justin Brooks. I'm a director here at ServiceNow, responsible for customer and industry workflows at Federal. I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel. So welcome to all attendees. A special thanks to Connie Coleman, Alicia Puccio, and the rest of the ServiceNow team. Today, we're going to hear from our panelists, followed by a Q&A session that will pop up with a few poll questions and then answer yours. Before we begin, I just want to encourage the audience to submit questions of your own in the Q&A section and also answer the poll questions that will be coming up throughout the session today. To kick things off, we wanted to set the stage to talk about the President's management agenda that was released back in October of 2021. And in that management agenda, there was three core priorities that were identified: the strengthening and empowering of the federal workforce, delivery of excellent, equitable, and secure federal services and customer experience, and the management of business of government to build back better. The President then promptly followed up with the executive order, and in that executive order, he called on agencies to put the citizen and the customer at the focus of everything that we collectively do as the government and the contractor community. As part of the executive order, the President identified 36 specific customer improvement areas across 17 federal agencies and identified them as specific high-impact service centers. But the EO is just not limited to those HISPs, but all agencies are delivering services to customers, whether those be citizens, veterans, service members of their families, or industry. So now I would like to introduce our panelists. If you would like to give a wave when I call your name, and please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, your current position, and anything else you'd like our audience to know about your department or agency. Mr. Mike Palmer, let's go ahead and start with you.
All right. Hi, my name is Michael Palmer. I'm with the Bureau of Industry and Security at the Department of Commerce. I am the Chief Experience Officer and Associate CIO for BIS. And just to give you a little bit of background on what BIS does, whenever a company or entity, that could be an individual, wants to export a technology outside of the United States, they need a license. And so half of what BIS does is that licensing process. And the other half of what BIS does is investigate cases of people trying to get around that licensing process. And so that's BIS in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Mr. Johnny Dickus, JD.
I'm Mr. Dickus from the Department of Energy. I'm the program manager for the Data Center Optimization Initiative, as well as sustainability. Some other hats I wear is the 21st Century IDEA Act program manager and the customer experience for the agency. So that's what I'm doing. I manage a lot of stuff with innovation and emerging technologies as well in the CIO's office. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dickus. Ms. Barbara Morton, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Great to be with you all today. So I am Barbara Morton. I am VA's Deputy Chief Veterans Experience Officer. I am a public servant, a proud public servant of about 16 years here at VA, and joined the Veterans Experience Office about 5.5 years ago. And essentially what we are charged with doing is really infusing the voice of the veteran to strategy, operations, and decision-making. And we do that through a number of capabilities: human-centered design, real-time surveys, the ability to translate that information into tangible tools to empower employees to deliver better experiences, technology, and engagement as well. I'm looking forward to diving into this topic area together. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Morton. Mr. Gary Washington.
Hi, I'm Gary Washington, and thank you for having me today. I am the USDA Chief Information Officer. I've been the Chief Information Officer a little over 4 years. I've been in USDA for about 11 years. I work really closely with our Office of Customer Experience and their plight to improve the customer experience for all of our citizens and employees. And we're really focused on really improving the customer experience and improving service delivery as well. And I'm very excited to be talking about the two important parts of the PMA to me, the workforce and the customer experience.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Washington. And we'll close out with Ms. Caroline Simmons.
Hi, everybody. I'm Caroline Simmons. I'm a senior strategist on a very small customer experience team over at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I'm fairly new to government service, transitioning from the private sector in the last year. And although I've been working in this space for the past decade, I have had the privilege of developing a particular expertise in building new programs and services within the government. So excited to be here today.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Simmons. And thank you to all of our panelists for joining us here today. And at the opening, I talked through the President's Management Agenda and the Executive Order. So inclusive of those directives, why does the federal government need to reprioritize the customer experience? Mike, was that someplace you'd like to start?
Sure. Some people choose to engage with the government and others are forced to because of what they need to do. And so you think about the multitude of experiences, and I think I was really exposed to this a lot during my time with the U.S. Digital Service and learned from the design community there that people shouldn't be forced to go through a poor experience just because they have to engage with the government. And so I think this executive order hits at the heart of that and makes it a priority for us. So for coming into my gig, my new gig here at BIS about six, 7 months ago, within the organization, I think one of the key things for our customer experience is just to have those customers at a foundational level. Because some organizations maybe not be at the maturity of even listening to their customers, which if their customers aren't even feeling listened to, then how can you really start to build a trust between you and the people that you're serving? So I think that's one thing that we've been focusing on, is just the fact that we're hearing what's needed from our communities that we serve, internal and external. So I'll just stop right there. That's kind of what we've focused on initially, is listening, a basic skill. So it's funny, so I'll cut it right there.
Can I add one thing? Something that Mike said really resonated with me, that like, just because you have to use government doesn't mean you should be forced to go through a bad experience. I mean, that to me is such a great encapsulation of it. And it really kind of grounds us in getting back to basics of why are we all here? We're here to serve the people first, not the bureaucracy first, right? And so I just think that it's some of the most important things are so foundationally simple. And I think, Mike, you just did a great job of describing that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Barbara. So, Mike was just talking about, foundationally, and Barbara, you were talking about the people, to transition. There's also the culture and the folks that are currently with an organization. So, how does an agency, work through their culture and the people factor in creating an environment where CX modernization can thrive?
Yeah, so I can kind of speak from a VA perspective. I mean, it's really interesting. So having the drivers that you mentioned, these levers in government, like an EO, which is really kind of the pinnacle of a driver for us in the executive branch, right? To sort of abide by and sort of, make sure we're kind of fulfilling that intent. I mean, it really, those things really help us, but to kind of seep deeply into the culture, I think you really have to connect the so what for your people, right? And for us, it's really interesting in VA. So we have multiple business lines. One of our largest business lines is medical care, as you probably are all familiar with. And so early on in our office formation back in 2016 or so timeframe, we knew we wanted to prove the concept of the value of experience. And we partnered early on with the Veterans Health Administration. It was a very easy connection for that team to make with why experience is so important, because they are literally caring for veterans and their families. And so I think there wasn't a large cultural leap in that respect. And we were able to sort of over time tie it to our core values as an organization. So everybody sees the connectivity of, let's say, respect and advocacy, which are two of our core values, to how we treat not only our customers, veterans, and their families, but also each other. And so I think being able to tie it to something, a common language, if you will, across an organization has been something that's been really useful in the VA space.
Absolutely. Caroline?
In my organization, partnerships with our stakeholders and customers ultimately make us more effective at our mission, right? Mike talked about trust. If they trust us, they're more likely to report an incident or provide us data that makes us have better, more effective decisions. With that said, it's a fairly new organization and it's a very technical one. And I'd be lying to say that, CX is not an uphill battle to incorporate into the fabric of our culture. But what we're asking them to do is not a natural muscle movement, and the acknowledgement that that is not a natural muscle movement. But ultimately, it comes back to what Barbara just talked about. It's the human at the other end. What is their experience? What do they think? And people aren't necessarily used to that concept. And so, Barbara, you said it a little differently, but we at CISA say, what's in it for me, right? How can you help program staff understand that incorporating these principles and fundamentally a different way of doing business, help them be more effective at their jobs, help them create better products. It's great to have executive top cover, and the EO certainly helps expedite that. But the support really comes by demonstrating on the ground what this work actually looks like and how it can benefit on a day-to-day basis program staff. And that's been really effective for us.
Thanks, Caroline.
This is Mr. Dykes. I'd like to say something. Recently, with the vaccine effort, right, working on both sides, working on the side of the customer on the inside, and when we're developing a digital service, right, as well as them understanding the customer outside that's got to come in and use that service. So as we're developing our requirements and having technical staff, that's very key, so they can understand the dynamics of what we're trying to capture, why we're trying to capture, so we can report to OMB, for example, as well as trying to make it easy for the customer to come in, do the reporting that they need to do, and have that that experience. So that's just an example of recently what we've been trying to do in the Department of Energy to make a good customer experience, and then leveraging that as a template for future development of digital services.
Thank you, JD. Mike, were you going to comment?
Well, I used to work at CISA like 5-6 years ago, and totally, I hear what you're saying about that not being woven into their culture. I am so intrigued on how CISA is gonna tackle CX, especially with the cybersecurity community and the other folks that are plugged in, private sector partners. And very interested in hearing about that over the coming months, weeks, years. Yeah.
It's interesting. My background is actually, I was at Target when they had their data breach several years ago. And much to the dismay of my colleagues at CISA now, I was not actually part of the data remediation. I was part of the cultural shift that happened after that. And, customers were angry and frustrated and totally had lost trust in us as a company. And, we had to change the way that we did business after that large scale event to build back that trust. And on the ground, like what I was talking about at CISA, you literally had to work with people who they had a specific task or a responsibility that they had previously been responsible for. And you were adding that and now you are responsible for thinking about the experience of the customer and the role that you personally play in that. If you've been to Target and you've had someone say, like, can I help you find something? That was part of the cultural shift. And it was a grind at the lowest level to teach people that that was now part of their new job. And I think you're seeing that now in government, and certainly at CISA, about there's an intentionality behind designing that experience that's happening with or without us actually thinking about it. And so, whether you're talking about agency to agency like it is at CISA, which is unique to some of you guys who are talking about agency to the American public, but there's an intentionality in how we're building trust and transparency about why we're doing something, what we're doing, and then how it benefits them, and getting people on the ground level, just like I had to do at Target, to see how they play a role. And I think, Barbara, you guys have been really successful at that at the VA of, this is the role that you play throughout this journey, and this is how you are personally responsible for being a part of that. That happens at the ground level, and it's going to take a lot of time. So I know it's been 5 years since you've been at CISA, but we're still grinding.
No, thank you, everyone. I'd like to come back to the foundational, aspects of setting the stage to deliver on, experiences. There's an entire industry built around feedback, right? You just have to look at Yelp and things like that the today's customer is open and willing to provide that feedback. And to that end, they're also become accustomed to many different modern experiences in their daily life, right? And they want to know why when they interact with government, they can't, have some of those similar experiences. And Mr. Washington, you were talking about the two things in the PMA that were of the most interest to you, right? And that was, the employees and then the customer experience. What is it that you see from, what citizens expect, and then also your employees and the technology that they're able to use in their personal life, and what they're able to use to deliver on services within their professional life as well?
I think if you think about it, when we go through our daily lives outside the federal government, I mean, we have an expectation that, things go seamlessly online. We can get anything, anywhere, anytime. Service delivery is important to everyone, whether you go into a restaurant, you go to a bank, or anywhere else. So I think that expectation exists with the employees and the people we serve. So, why shouldn't we provide that to them? I mean, that's how things are done in the 21st century, So I think, as we go through this journey, because it's not going to happen overnight, but as we go through this journey, I think, people will find that there will be, not only will you make your customers happy, and as a government, we'll get more positive feedback in terms of how we're doing, but there will be other monumental benefits as well. As we, focus on the customer, truly deliver services that are important to them in the way that they want to see them delivered, and the things that they need.
Absolutely. Hey, Kim, if we could, let's post a poll question. I'd like to hear from the audience on what they feel is the biggest inhibitor to their customer experience goals. Mr. Dykes, yesterday when we were speaking, we talked a little bit about, the infrastructure that needs to be in place to support, the aspirations of agencies to deliver customer service. Would you like to talk a little bit about what you're seeing from your organization?
Absolutely. So there's all these challenges of trying to integrate the different technologies. And just for example, in this recent vaccine effort, we use 5 different cloud environments to make that all work, trying to integrate all that and to make it a good customer experience. So when they come in, when they're logging in through login.gov, for example, making that a good experience, totally authenticate, make sure that they can understand why we're having to do these extra steps for security to protect their data, their personal information, right? Some of the things we're thinking about too from emerging technologies is the conversational AI, right? So many people are getting used to like, hey Siri, hey Alexa, right? And getting to the information or the service that they're looking for very quickly. And I know it will take a while for government to get to that point, but that's the type of expectation that the public is getting used to, right? They're turning on their lights by using an app. So as we develop our digital services, we need to take a look at some of these technologies, right, to make it a better experience for them to interact with the federal government. Thank you.
What I'm finding is that like using prototyping and just quick trying new things out, it's fitting very well into the customer experience world, and involving users and customers in those experiences with the kinds of technologies that that Mr. Dykes was talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if you guys saw the poll when it popped up, but over 50% of the respondents said legacy technology is the biggest inhibitor to, the goals of modernization and creating the new experiences. Caroline, we also have a question. I think it's a very good one that came through in the Q&A specific for you. What are good ways to sustain energy during the grind to get people to realize that everyone is responsible for CX?
It's funny, the what's in it for me applies not only when you're talking externally and you're, to the point made earlier, like when you're pitching it to the end user, like this is why we're doing it, this is the benefit, but it really comes down to that internal piece as well, like how we're communicating, that wasn't English, but how we communicate, like manage expectations, clarify what everybody's role is. That applies whether you're talking about your customers or silos. It's about finding champions across the different programs at different levels. So, we've identified some executive champions, we've identified some program staff. We've been working really closely with people who on a day-to-day basis, their job is interacting with other agencies, whether that's SLTT partners or industry or other agencies. But how can we start to win people over slowly and demonstrate the value in the approach that we are taking? We're not doing this to you, we're not doing this for you, we're doing this with you. And I mentioned, like, I'm part of a very small team. And so eventually we get pulled off certain projects. And so how can we make sure that the residual value that we're providing is that they know they can come back to us as a resource and that they know what questions to ask. And so that they understand that it's the approach that we're pitching and that whatever we've interacted with is ultimately better because we were involved, because we asked the right questions. And I'll be honest, we're still working through what are those right questions? Do we understand the customer demand? Is that a service or product that we should even be pursuing? Are we positioned to provide unique value to customers? The answer to that question is not always yes. And many of my colleagues, often jump into a customer engagement and they just ask, well, what do you want from us? And that's not exactly the right question because a lot of people don't actually know what they want. And it's about intentionally designing not just the product or service, but the experience in which you gather feedback so that you are designing that service or product to meet the actual underlying need. I hope that's helpful.
It is, Caroline. That's a good segue to a couple more questions that came in. Very good questions from the audience. Two of them are very similarly related. First question comes from Gary Williams, and he asked, how do you measure the success of a CX initiative? And that was followed up by Michael Marona. And he said, commercial companies like Target can measure their ROI by revenue, sales, customer retention. So how does government measure that ROI? I want to imagine there's things like customer feedback and SLAs. Barbara, I see you nodding your head. Do you have some thoughts here?
Yeah, so this is such a great question. And if I can just rewind in history a little bit. So
Sure.
Back when our office was established in 2015, 2016, there was a lot of debate about this very issue. Like, how do you measure impact here, right? And so for us, we were sort of born, our office and capability was born out of a crisis, really, the Phoenix VA Medical Center wait time crisis in 2014. And so for us, we knew that we had lost trust. You heard Michael and Caroline talk about trust, and that's sort of our North Star, that's our currency. So the way we measure our impact at a high level is literally asking veterans and other users, do you trust the department to fulfill its commitment to veterans? That is our sort of bellwether measure of success. And since we launched our capability, we started with a level of trust at 55% agreement or strong agreement with that statement, right? That's like a D, like not a great place to start in 2016. But fast forward to today, where we have really, again, proven the concept through healthcare, also the digital space as well, va.gov and our mobile app. We are now at a level of trust where 79% of those surveyed either say they agree or strongly agree with that exact same simple question. And so I think what we have to do in government is sort of open our minds to thinking about measures of success can be operational measures, right? Additional enrollees, more people who engage with us. But a co-equal measure of our success and impact has to be those very simple questions about, do you trust this agency? Was it easy to get what you wanted? Was it effective? Do you feel like a valued customer? So elevating those experience measures as co-equal performance measures as other traditional operational measures is really how we VA have done it. And we think that it can also apply, of course, across other agencies. And indeed, you have the OMB A11 circular, which asks us as executive branch agencies to measure in this common language and these common domains. So I think that's kind of how we're tackling it at VA and across government.
Funny, we stopped using the word feedback and we call it customer data. And to Barbara's point, she listed off sort of the non-traditional measures of success. And in a technical organization, we have a lot of data on agencies. We have a lot of data on our customer that's very operational, it's very technical. And pushing at the executive level that there is also value in having this, I don't want to say feelings because that's never going to go over well in my organization, but this other set of metrics that will improve their ability to make decisions and prioritize stuff. And it is, do they trust us? How many people are using it? If they were using and they're no longer using it, why are they no longer using it? And that set of data is just as valuable as the technical data. And that's a cultural shift from an executive perspective that we've been pushing.
I'd like to chime in on that. I agree. The geek in me, for example, the performance metrics on everything, always constantly looking at that and trying to shift the cultural and behavioral of others to the customer experience, right? Transactions per second and how long it took someone to fill out a form. That's one thing, but looking at how easy was it to use? And then, like you said, instead of saying feedback, what was your customer experience? What was your experience? And asking them to get some feedback on there so we can make those products and services even better. You're right, Caroline.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, we just talked about, what the, the administration is doing, right, from a departmental level, what you guys are doing at an agency level. We've got the executive branch to put out, the PMA and the executive order. We had another question that came in from Eric Johnson. Many times these executive orders come out and there's a directive and there's no budget that's assigned to it, right? So, from you all's perspective, the legislative branch, what is your expectation from them from a budgetary standpoint? What would you like to see to bring those three legs of the stool together?
Well, I'll chime in quickly. We struggle with resources just as it is with meeting our mission. We do it effectively, but we do it on as my boss says, on an RC Cola budget, not a Pepsi budget. So I think with attempting to more effectively meet customer needs, I think simple resources is a thing to talk about. The other thing that comes to mind is the ability to do user research, and any potential policies, laws that limit that, I think is fundamentally going to prevent or discourage effective customer experience work. I also think there's some interesting things that could be done in terms of going back to Gary with the workforce to potentially offer some unique ways to bring on customer experience workforce and really grow that, because it's just not there right now, I think, to the degree that it needs to be to fulfill the executive order easily. So I think that those couple of things just pop into my mind.
I think you can ask for more resources, and I think if you talk to all the agencies, they'll say that this area needs to be better resourced because it is a priority for this administration. But in USDA, we have been very creative about getting everybody involved, including our component agencies. And I think you can use that as a step towards showing them the so what or what that means for them, because it's a partnership, you know. And quite frankly, I think customer experience is everybody's responsibility, and we should be thinking about the customer moving forward. So, our deputy secretary is very focused on this, and I work very closely with our customer experience officer, and so that we can work together to make sure, not just from a business perspective, we capture the metrics and we know what the high impact service providers are doing, but we actually have a plan to improve from end to end what the customer experience really is.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Washington. So, we were just talking about funding, right? And that funding can go a lot of different places for different resources. There was a question that just came in around, how can the government be more efficient in delivering, their services? So when you think about it, things from a technology perspective, and earlier we were just talking about the technologies that folks become accustomed to in their personal life, they are exposed to things like virtual agents, chat, self-service, and a knowledge database. A lot of folks don't want to pick up a phone and make a call. They want to have everything at their fingertips, the information that they need, and make a clear submission, and then see where things are in the process. So, to that end, right, knowledge base and the technologies I just spoke of, are there things that you all are looking at for your agencies that you're looking for modernization in those areas? Where do you stand?
So Mr. Dykes, I like to talk about like that because the transparency is so important, right? Things going into a black hole, you submit something, you have no idea where it's at along the way, right? And so there may be approvals and so forth that have to go through and different reviews, especially, people are coming to the Department of Agency, for example, for loans and grants for different things, for clean energy and so forth. And so they'd like to know where things sit, right? And so adding transparency, where along the stage a particular request is for like a loan or a grant, really helps the customer know where they're at. So that transparency good. And I like to go back on the funding issue really quickly. They put money toward the 21st Century Aid, right? Not that very first year, but the following year, they did provide some funding to help us get up and running. And that was beneficial, right? So it's really putting your money where you think that importance is, right? And what you want to be successful at. So I think if Congress can actually look at this, because we just got, the Federal Agency Customer Experience Act, right? I didn't see any dollars yet, but, so hopefully we'll get some dollars to go with that, right? As we try to do these initiatives. And I think that's very important. And some people have small teams, and we really try to do what we can with those and try to get out some new technologies. And that's why, like, for example, we use, the agile stuff, so we can get a little bit out there, get some feedback, and put some more out there, and then try to build, because sometimes, we can't wait and do waterfall, like you take a year and a half to get some. Our customers experience quick, responsive, right? And so we need to quickly get something out there and get feedback and continue to make things better. That's how I share that. Thanks.
Mr. Dykes and I talked a little bit about how we're focusing on data. That is at the core of trying to paint the picture of what's going on with your various customers and providing and the services you're providing to them. So I think modernizing our data infrastructure along with our underlying infrastructure under that, as well as thinking about modernizing the actual applications and digital services that folks are interacting with. But the data piece, I think there's that community within the federal government still maturing,
So Mike, it goes back to what we talked about in the question about the legacy applications that are out there, right? There's a lot of old stovepipe legacy applications that are providing certain, services to our customers. And, there's been a lot of legislation on trying to improve and get rid of that legacy. So we need from a cybersecurity perspective, right, we need to get those things upgraded. I know within our last efforts with vaccine is trying to pull all the necessary information together. We had 3 different data sets that we're dealing with, for example, right? So data is very important, and having good people to understand that data and bring it together, and also make sure it's secure. So yeah, thanks, Mike.
If I can just add one additional comment, and I love this question. I mean, for me, the shortest way to greater efficiencies is through design thinking, right? To me, there's no better way to get to that great end state for your customer than applying human-centered design right up front. So you want to feed people what they're hungry for and not what you think they might be hungry for, right? So I think design is sort of the key methodology to us, collective us in government getting there.
And helping people understand that upfront investment will pay off years from now, instead of rebuilding something that people maybe didn't want or didn't quite hit the mark. And the idea that the initial investment is worth it. And that culture comes back to culture.
Yeah, I agree with everybody here. Scalable ROI that is going to provide benefit year over year, and that can continue to be modernized and revised, coming back to continuous process improvement, and those kinds of things are incredibly important. If we could, Kim, let's go ahead and post the question and hear from the audience. I'd like to know what kind of technology solutions best support their agency's CX goals. Another component of delivering these services is there's a lot of folks on this call here today from the system integrator and partner community. So there's an access to additional thought leadership. How do you all call upon your on-site contractors to help and get in the boat to say, right, to help this modernization initiative?
Well, I'll say we in terms of our contractors, we make sure, whether it be through our strategic planning or conversations that we have, or policy decisions we make, that they understand where we're going as an agency. And and I work with the procurement officer to ensure that that is put into our procurements, IT procurements moving forward. So I think it's important. I mean, the way we feel, whatever contractor supports USDA is a strategic partner of ours. And, they really have to be on board with helping us implement our future, and using the methodologies that we put in place to get towards that future, which, like Barbara said, human-centered design, I'm a serious believer in that. And, that's a great way to get input from your customers, and that's important in providing them what they need, and not what we think they need, as Barbara stated. So, I think, through strategic planning and policy decisions, and through procurement process, you can drive them towards implementing where you're implementing your goals as an agency.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. I'm not sure if you guys saw the poll come up. Not surprisingly, 90% of the folks were split down the middle, 45%, 45% on self-service and automation. Was not surprised to see that only 5% was on telephony. I was surprised to see that it was only 5% on machine learning and AI, which is a evolving kind of market. You're going to start seeing that more in people's commercial lives, but predicting motions and requests that are coming in for proactive. Have any of you all done any investigation or looked at AI tactics and implementation that can take place as you're going out there and delivering these services? And that could include, right, things like social listening, so you can be proactive for Twitter and other things that are taking place out on the broader web.
The only thing that we've been looking at, and not speaking about vendors or anything, but is using the machine learning and AI for when they're filling out a form, seeing how long it took them. It took them 5 minutes to fill out this form, and where were the areas that were difficult for them to fill out, right? Did it take them 2 minutes to do this one little thing? Did we ask the right question? Did we give enough information for them to fill out? So having that type of data helps us to go back, right? And go back and see what we can do better about making it a better experience for the customer. So that's how we're using the technology and tools that we have to hopefully make a better experience.
Absolutely. We talked a lot about what folks are becoming accustomed in their commercial lives. Are there sites that are out there in industry that you guys are looking to emulate, that you say that's an experience that we can learn from? What are some of those companies that think are most relevant to what you all are delivering?
So I can kind of speak from a VA perspective. So I think there are many different companies that we would sort of want to learn from. But one of the ones that we continually sort of see a natural alignment to, because we have a very similar customer base, is USAA, right? So we know USAA provides, incredible experiences. And from my understanding, a lot of that is because they have this sort of back-end data integration. So they know their customers, they can see them in the round, they can proactively reach out and connect with any of their customers on any number of services. So that's an area I think for us to learn from, and a company to learn from.
That's a great example. Mike?
I mean, just recently we've been talking about Domino's and the transparent. You want to talk about transparency?
Right.
You see who is making your pizza and where it's at, and then you are psyched to walk in and hand them your money. I mean, and that, having that apply to licenses, that would be amazing. So I just in thinking about amazing experiences out there that we're taking into account as we're designing new services, that's just an example of one in the private sector that just blows customers away. And that, I feel like, is what we should be aiming for as a government experience.
Mike, I was on stage last week for a presentation, and I was surprised how many people actually stood up and mentioned Domino's. That one's getting a lot of focus. I guess we all need to go out and order some Domino's and see what that experience is like. JD, I saw you come off of mute. Did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to agree. It was funny that Mike mentioned that, because I did at one time work at Domino's, and everything, you knew exactly where things were at. With from the time they pick up the phone to the time that pizza was delivered, they got everything down. Real customer experience. So it's ironic that Mike brought that up.
You've never wanted that little red bar to move faster ever, right? Like you kind of hit refresh, like, come on, I know it's on the next step.
But the ironic thing is that's capturing like the younger generation. That is what they're running into and expecting. And if that's what we start to provide as a government organization, I think that would be amazing. So yeah.
They do. They crave the transparency. That is so true.
Okay, excellent. So I wanted to ask one more question of you all, and then we can go directly to the Q&A and read some of the remaining questions that are there. But the mission is delivering services to the customer, whomever they may be. Is customer experience directly and to what level of criticality imperative to success of delivering on the mission of each of your agencies?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually think there are national security implications to not doing this or not doing it well. Ultimately, if our customers don't trust us and don't know what we're doing and why we're doing it and why we're asking for certain things, they're less likely to work with us. And I think the partnership aspect is critical to our long-term mission success, and building that foundation that we are credible and knowledgeable and here to help, and shifting from that compliance kind of big brother reputation into that we are here to partner, and it's a collective effort.
And if I can just add, something that Gary mentioned about, you think about public servants and public service, and the opportunity we have to energize an entirely next and new generation of public servants by having things like human-centered design thinking, co-design, just this creative space to get back to sort of that human connection, because ultimately, I think we're all pretty simple. We crave that human connection. I see this as a very important recruitment tool now and in the future for government to retain and attract the right type of talent.
And I think as we try, as we go through this journey to improve our services, I think absolutely there's a tie to mission delivery, because you want people to positively respond to how you're delivering your services. And, right now there are a lot of, complaints, questions, what have you, comments about, in different agencies, things being manual or taking too long, or there not being enough transparency. So, I think going through this journey and applying this government-wide would do nothing but improve customer satisfaction, our ability to recruit and retain that next workforce, and so I just think there is a relationship, and it's going to do nothing but make things better for everybody.
I can't get over what Barbara said, and Gary, what you just said about retention and igniting a passion. And, Mike, you were talking about dominoes, right? If you are selling that you have the opportunity to create something like that in the government, that, people do have misconceptions that this is bureaucratic. And Justin, you asked us a question earlier about silos, right? When I think of government, I inherently think about bureaucracy and silos and like everyone kind of doing their own thing. And that's not the case. Like, this is igniting at the highest levels and the lowest levels a focus of how do we all work together so that the thing that we are creating is ultimately better, not just better for us as an agency, but better for the people who are using it. And as an agency with 11,000 openings, I think was the latest number, we are seeking the next round of great talent, and infusing this kind of creativity and excitement behind you could do cool things in the government. That's such a good point, Gary and Barbara. I'm excited.
One of the last comments I'd like to make is, like, I had this vision, and I think I mentioned it the other day, that a portal, single sign-on to come to the government, right? I'm an older gentleman, right? IRS, Social Security, I'm a veteran, 20 years Air Force, right? I'd like to go to one place, enter the portal with my single sign-on, and use my conversational AI to get to the service I need, right? I can see that happening, and I can see, as long as we have people in the government that can see that and have that vision and get the buy-in from the next generation coming in, they have that desire to use that app on their phone to get to that stuff. And I think as we try to change the culture, the behavior of people, we'll get there. It's this big ship we're trying to turn, but I think we'll get there. Thank you.
So, the takeaway on that part in question, right? So I think it'd be fair to say that mission success is synonymous with exceptional citizen and customer experience. Ms. Morton, Barbara, there is a comment, in the chat. I'd like to draw your attention to it, but it was from one of the members of the audience, and was talking about a veteran that passed away, and really, talking through and calling out the excellent experience and healthcare that was provided to her family. So please, take a
Thank you for sharing that. It means a lot. Shared passion, shared purpose of my VA brothers and sisters. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And as a veteran myself, I'm truly appreciative for everything you do for the veteran community. So folks, keep coming, having your questions come in. We'll be running through and answering a few of these. Let me read another one here. Your customers appreciate having a consistent engagement experience across an agency, right? For all the different services that are provided, both phone, internet, walk-in. How do you ensure that these various channels provide consistent delivery of services and customer experience?
Oh no, I feel like that comes from leadership, like some of our jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just consistent messaging of culture and expectations on a couple of core values. I'll tennis racket to my colleagues to to run
I'll
with that.
chime in on that, Mike. So for example, the 21st century, we were asked to convert our paper-based forms to digital, correct? And so we did that, but there was also a requirement that we maintain a paper base because there's still an audience out there that may still have to use paper. They're not, we had example, we had 4 generations within the Department of Energy. Think about that, 4 different generations. Some people are geeks out there and don't have mobile devices and laptops and desktops to use to get to this digital services. So they still require, they'll write a letter into the Department of Energy for a Freedom of Information Act question that they're looking for an answer. So we got to provide the forms, still provide that capability in a paper-based form. So having those multiple channels, whether they can walk in, and I know that was a struggle. I think it changed a lot of culture and behavior with the pandemic. I mean, so much was done over the internet, but we still needed to provide that certain services to those people, and having those multi-channels still available potentially to service that community.
If I could add to that, I think even for a department as large as the Department of Agriculture, you have to have a vision for what you want your agency to look like at a point in time and how you want to deliver those services. And I think that message has to be consistent throughout the department and into the lowest levels of the components. And there needs to be measurements against obtaining that state, So I think it does come from leadership, as Mike said, but there has to be, a team effort to make sure that you obtain that.
I think that's an interesting point. I think it requires both that top down and bottom up. And, in my target story, when I was talking about teaching individual people, like, this is the role that you play, that you are accountable for in this broader experience. And, leadership can mandate a lot of things, but if you don't make that culture shift and make everyone understand, whether they're part of the paper service or they're part of the digital service, that you play a role in this and you need to be thinking about this in everything that you do, that's where you'll find success.
Absolutely. I think we've got time for one final question. There's a question from Martha Davis, and she asked about the tactics that agencies are using to understand what matters to their customers. We talked about feedback and probably surveys that can be obtained. But what else allows you to understand what matters to build things that the customers will use and will improve their experiences?
I mean, for us, it goes back to human-centered design. I know I'm like a broken record, and co-design, really. I mean, bringing the customer closer to you and inside of the tent as you sort of work through, what problem we're trying to solve, and then sort of the tool or implementation. So from a technology perspective, we partner really closely at VA with the Chief Technology Officer, who is also a USDS Digital Services alum, and they've been rolling out VA's first ever mobile app. And so they're always thinking ahead, leading ahead. And they've designed it based on direct feedback and co-design iteration with veterans. And so it's really just practicing that, being comfortable with that rapid iteration, again, bringing the customer inside this journey of co-design with you. And it's, wildly popular. So I think design, again, is really the key for us.
I totally agree with Barbara, and I'll give you an example. We've actually gone out to farms and included farmers and showed them through human-centered design, what their interaction is, where they are in the process, what the interaction is, what their actions are, those kinds of things. And that's even before you think about technology, because you need to get that customer input and feedback and business requirements before you even think about, what are you going to develop to make this happen?
If no other comments, we're going to put up one final poll around your CPE credit. Please fill out if you'd like to receive credit for this event. I would like to close things out with thanking this very esteemed panel for sharing their experiences, how they're leading the way at their agency and across government, to continue to evolve and deliver exceptional experiences to, our most important resource, which is the American people and our industry. If there's any comments that the panel would like to make as a parting gesture to the audience, please feel free to do so now. Anyone?
Great discussions. Appreciate the time and attention for everybody.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much for joining us today. We hope to see you again on March 24th is going to be the next panel where the discussion will be on mapping a zero trust journey for the federal government. Okay. With that, enjoy the rest of your day and thank you all for your time.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.